So much, Margot. A couple of weeks ago, I saw something on the news that maybe some of you had also seen or heard or read about, or maybe were to some extent affected by. And apparently it was newsworthy because I saw a number of stories about this. But apparently, Taylor Swift is going on tour again. And as she was going on tour, Ticketmaster was going to be, I don't know if it was pre-orders or something. Let me just say, I didn't even trouble myself to go back and read enough details, because if I did, that would indicate that I care about this, and I really don't. And so, but anyway, apparently Taylor Swift had some deal with Ticketmaster, and they were going to be doing pre-sale, some sort of orders, and I don't know, something didn't work. I don't know. I think that there were so many people, the website crashed, I don't know, something like that. All I know is there were people that were very much affected by this. That I saw some news stories of some like people crying because they weren't able to get in to get a ticket to go see Taylor Swift, and others that had gotten up and like since 3 a.m. been trying to refresh on their browser to try to get a ticket to Taylor Swift's concert. And I was kind of thinking, I don't quite get this. I don't understand what the big deal is. And in one of the stories that I saw, it said that Taylor Swift had not been on tour for 4 years. I thought, well, maybe it's a case of absence makes the heart grow fonder. And so people just missed her. And so, she's finally on tour back 4 years later. But I just remember seeing these news stories and reading these news stories, and then even seeing people on Facebook, some that are friends of mine, that were lamenting the fact that they had spent all of these hours trying to get a ticket and were not able to get a ticket. And there are some instances where I am reminded that I'm not as young as I used to be. I don't think that I'm not like old. I'm 47, but one of the things that I'm realizing is that the older you get, the further you get from an awareness or knowledge of pop culture. And so like the older you get, the less it is that you kind of know what's really going on, or at least what the trends are. And I know this comes as a surprise to you, that as a banjo player, I'm not like really in tune with the trends of pop culture. And so seeing all this stuff about Taylor Swift, I was thinking to myself, I don't quite get it. What's the big deal? And to underscore just how removed I am from what's going on in culture, I wondered this. What type of music does she even sing? Like, I knew it was not bluegrass. I suspected she was not a rap artist. Figured it was probably not classical. Honestly, I thought she must be a country singer. Turns out she's not a country singer. Did you know that? You did. I didn't. I had no idea. Anyway, I just didn't know. And so I'm seeing all of this and all this to do and all these disappointed people and all these excited people, and I'm thinking to myself, I just don't get it. What's the big deal? Well, obviously, we've got Thanksgiving in the rearview mirror. The Christmas season now is in full swing. We've got decorations everywhere. Now, the fact that you are here on a December morning in a Christian church and a worship center suggests the fact that you have at least some inkling as to the significance of Jesus coming to the world, that you know something about it. Not that you're an expert or anything, but you know something about it. But I want you to give thought to the people that are maybe today going to be standing in lines in decorated stores, getting ready to fork out a stack of cash, and as they look at this big bill, they're thinking, why is it we do this again? And it's Christmas, I know that. Why do we go to all of this trouble? Why are people going to this expense? Why all these decorations? What's the big deal with Jesus coming? Now, at the end of the day, that's a very, very simple question. But it's an important question. And as you are encountering people at work, as you're encountering people at school, as you encounter people in the stores, the reality is you're encountering people that are wondering, as they're making it rain, What's the big deal? That simple, important question is one that you and I had better have a good answer for. In truth, there is a good answer. That's what we want to think about this morning. Why is Jesus coming into the world such a big deal? Why is it of consequence? We see the answer to that question today starting in Isaiah chapter 9. Isaiah chapter 9. And we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 9 on each Sunday now leading up until Christmas. We're going to look in Isaiah chapter 9 today, starting with verse 1, where we are told, and it's pretty clear this is picking up midstream as it begins with the term nevertheless. Isaiah 9 verse 1, "Nevertheless, the gloom of the distressed land will not be like that of the former times when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future he will bring honor by way of the sea to the land east of the Jordan and to Galilee of the nations. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness." Skip down to verse 6 where we're told that a child will be born for us. A son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting or Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. What we just read really helps answer the question for us, why is Jesus coming into the world such a big deal? And I believe what God impressed on Isaiah to pen all of these years ago answers that. And the first way it does is this. His coming into the world is such a big deal because he is the opposite of cancel culture. He is the opposite of cancel culture. Now, this message comes to you as the beginning of a new series that we're calling What Child Is This? And it's based on Isaiah 9:6, where Jesus is given here 4 different titles. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal or Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. And each week between now and Christmas, we're going to be looking at these titles. But this passage today, it really does help, again, answer the question. Why is his coming into the world such a big deal? Well, because he's the opposite of cancel culture. What we've read here comes to us written by a prophet named Isaiah that God used to write somewhere between 740 and 700 BC. Keep in mind those 2 letters, BC. So 700-ish years BC, before Christ, God was saying this stuff through Isaiah. Now, as a prophet, sometimes God would use or impress on a prophet to say things that had to do with the current situation or things that were just around the corner. In other cases, God would use a prophet to describe things that were off distant in the future in terms of their realization or coming to fruition. And what we've read about today actually has application on both fronts, speaking about not only contemporary circumstances, but things that were going to come. And so he starts and he talks about the former times when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. I know when you're thinking Christmas passages, when you're thinking Christmas verses, you're like, give me some good Zebulun and Naphtali, right? What in the world does that have to do with anything? And in fact, what is the land of Zebulun and Naphtali? Is that near Reidsville? What's the big deal with this? All right, these are 2 tribes, or remember there are 12 tribes of Israel. And these are 2 of the 12 tribes or clans of people. And these tribes, among other things, they had territory that was given to them. And so your tribe, your clan had an area where you, those sort of borders of where you and your people kind of hung out. Now, these 2 tribes were located in the northern part of Israel, in what we would know as Galilee. Now, he says, and alludes to the fact that these lands were humbled. And he talks about the gloom of the distressed land that they experienced. It is likely, almost certain, that this is a reference to what was known as the Syro-Ephraimite War. Something I'm sure you're insanely familiar with, right? You were thinking about that just this morning. Yes, the Syro-Ephraimite War. What you need to know is this, and before your eyes glaze over and you just drift off into detail that you think this has nothing to do with me, understand this. You have 2 tribes, 2 of the groups of people that are part of the nation, part of the people of God, and an enemy comes in and oppresses them. An enemy comes in and distresses them. They are under attack. They are under assault. And when that happens, misery ensues. As you are under attack, as you're under assault, as war breaks out, we see this in these areas, especially closest to the Ukrainian-Russian border, just how ugly it can get. That's what these lands were experiencing. Now, to step back helps us to understand the significance of this without getting lost in the details. God is talking to a group of not just people, but to a group of His people who are what? They are distressed. They are experiencing gloom. Why are they experiencing this? Verse 1 answers that question for us because it says, He humbled them. God humbled them. Whether it's the Syro-Ephraimites, any other group, insert any other nation, ultimately, the one that is causing their their distress, that is causing their gloom and the misery they're experiencing, we're told that God was responsible for this. And He did this to humble them. In short, what you see is, and time again in the Old Testament we see this, you have God having called out a group of people as His own. And He says, I will be your God, you will be my people, and I'm going to use you as a light unto the nations. I've got a plan and a purpose for you, and I'm going to set you apart, and I'm going to work through you, and I'm going to use you. And though He set them apart consistently over and over and over again, unlike us at all, they started acting like those that they were around. And they started acting less and less like God's people and more and more like these pagan nations that are around them. And God is seeking to draw them back into a relationship with them. God is seeking to snap His fingers in such a way as to get them to respond to Him again, to want to be and want to live like His people again. And what did? They just kept ignoring Him, keeping their back turned to Him. And God would send a prophet. He would send a judge. He would send all of these warnings, turn back to me. He's calling them, inviting them back to Him, calling them to repentance, calling them to change their behavior, calling them to obedience again. And time and again, they decided, we're not interested. We kind of like how things are going on our own, doing stuff our own way. And so what God would do is He would work through circumstances in such a way as to get their attention. And in truth, there are a few things that you can do to get a group of people's attention greater than having them to be attacked, having them come under military assault. Because at that point, you realize just how vulnerable you are. You realize just how dependent you are on God being on your side. And so God uses this, we're told, to humble them. And He would work in ways that would get their attention. But then you get to the next statement. So they've been humbled. He talks about this misery, this gloom, this distress in these lands. But at the end of the second half of verse 1, in the future He will bring honor. So we go from gloom and distress to honor. And then we see it characterized in verse 2 that people walking in darkness have seen a great light, that light has dawned. Well, He's saying it's like the clouds have rolled in. There was this terrible storm, but now it's getting ready to happen. The sun's getting ready to come out. What exactly is He talking about, and what is the big deal with this? A phrase that I use, in fact, it's in this particular point of application. The two words cancel culture is something that I spent a few weeks on Wednesdays, both in the morning and the evening, talking about. We're hearing increasingly over and over again these two words used as part of pop culture's vernacular vocabulary. And when you hear those words, it's likely that those words mean something to you. And what we are seeing with respect to cancel culture is this, that you have kind of the tide of culture and its feelings about a whole lot of things. Things that are popular, things that are unpopular, things that are approved of, things that are not approved of. And if someone operates or acts in ways that offends the feelings of the overall drift of culture, what happens? Well, those individuals, they get canceled. And so if it's a celebrity like an actor well, that actor or that actress, they don't get new movie offerings. And so nobody wants to give them a potential script to act. So we're going to have nothing to do with him. If it's an athlete, if it is some other celebrity that has all these massive endorsements, all these companies line up in mass to say, listen, we don't want anything to do with you. We're dropping all these contracts. We're ending all of these endorsements. Your face is not going to show up on Wheaties. We don't want anything to do with you. We're going to drop you like a hot potato. If it is someone in political position or political office, everybody around them just kind of operates as though they have leprosy, and we're not going to talk about, we're just going to completely back away from them. And how cancel culture works is this. Someone acts in a way that is deemed out of bounds, and so what do you do with them? You cancel them. You have nothing to do with them. You ostracize them. You act as though they don't exist, or that at least they certainly don't exist to you. Now, understand this. It is reasonable. In fact, it's human nature, in truth, that we act like that, isn't it? Now, the term cancel culture hasn't been around a long time, but the act of canceling sure has been around a long time, isn't it? I mean, how many times is it that you've witnessed that someone has wronged, someone has crossed someone else, there's been some failure in a relationship, there's been some personal failure that someone has committed towards someone else, and what happens? I'm done. That's it. Canceled. Over with. That's human nature. You wrong me, you cross me, I'm done with you. That's human nature. It is into human nature. It is into something that has been around, not just in 2022, but even in 740 BC, where people, when you mess with us, we say we're done with you. It is into that context that people who have done what? Who have wronged God. They have turned their backs on Him over and over and over again, and He sent warning after warning after warning. In fact, it gets to the point where He has to humble them by sending an enemy army in to overtake them, that He has to send gloom and despair and misery and tragedy into their circumstance so as to get their attention. Does God cancel them? Into the gloom and into this distress, people walking in darkness see a great light. And a light is dawned among those living in the land of darkness. Why is Jesus coming into the world such a big deal? Because His coming into the world stands as such a remarkable contrast to cancel culture. His coming into the world stands in such a remarkable contrast to how so many times that we operate. That God is interested in, and that people who have disobeyed Him, people who have shown no interest, people that are headed in the opposite direction, people that aren't pleasing Him, people that aren't putting a smile on His face, that He doesn't say, I'm through with you. He reaches out to them. That's a glaring contrast. Contrast is interesting because it really helps highlight and cause things to be noticed by us. Just a couple of weeks ago, you had many of you gathered with family or friends for Thanksgiving. Some of you hosted family and friends at your house. And if you were hosting, other people might have brought things, but you as the host might have been the one that prepared the majority of the food. And so there's some traditional stuff that you think with Thanksgiving, right? You're going to have some turkey. You're going to have some dressing or stuffing if you're like a Yankee or something. So anyway, you have turkey and dressing, there's cranberry sauce. There's that. But everything else, it just kind of differs from person to person, house to house. I mean, so those things are kind of standard fare. But as you were planning out a menu, you probably think, all right, we're going to have turkey and dressing. And then you probably ask yourself this, what else would go with that? What might complement that? Sweet potato casserole. That would complement that. How about some broccoli casserole? That would complement that. You probably weren't looking at like Indian dishes, were you? Right? Did you want General Tso's chicken with it? I mean, that just doesn't seem to go with it. I remember when I was my first year in seminary, I was living in North Raleigh with my friend Alan. That was his last year at State, my first year at Southeastern, and we had an apartment there in North Raleigh about halfway between the two schools. And Alan and I'm not a big fish fan to begin with, but he had been, I think over the weekend, he'd been somewhere and had gotten some fried fish, and it was left over. And so he was going to heat this up, which, man, there's nothing like microwaved fried fish, right? And so Alan goes and puts this stinky stuff in the microwave, and then he gets this fish nice and hot, and then, even to this day, I'm still grossed out by this. He sat there with a tall glass of cold milk. Fish and milk. And why do I still remember that? In short, because the contrast is so great. Fish and milk, they don't complement, they don't go together. You know what doesn't go together? Waywardness, headstrong disobedience, and grace. What doesn't go together is me headed in this direction, offending you, and then you not canceling me. What stands in contrast is this notion that people who have been and deservedly were walking in darkness, the gloom and distress and misery they experienced, they deserved that. But God didn't say, I'm done with you. He did that as part of the process of getting their attention so that He might draw them into relationship with Him. And what does that do? It serves as a wonderful contrast. And it shows us that Jesus is the absolute opposite of cancel culture. It was true not simply in the 700 BCs, but it's true in the 2020 ADs. That Jesus comes today, and the gospel message is such good news because it's the absolute opposite of cancel culture. And that God is not interested in saying, I'm done with screw-ups, I'm done with rule violators, but that I'm still interested in having a relationship with Him. That's in part why it is such a big deal that He came. But beyond that, we see the big deal about the coming of Jesus is this, that He is a guide with proven experience. He is a guide with proven experience. As God, through Isaiah, is painting the picture of the hope that is to come, He describes it in verse 2 as this, that it's like people who are walking around in darkness, that they've seen a great light. Now, when you see darkness and light used in Scripture, almost without fail, these are always associated into positive and negative categories. And so, for example, darkness is always associated as being negative, associated with evil. For example, Satan is the ruler of darkness. Light is always understood to be positive. It's always associated with the absence of sin. And so he's talking about people who've been operating in darkness. They've been operating in waywardness, that they're going to be experiencing light, that they're going to be experiencing hope again. There's another way where light and darkness is used, and I think it has to do with the very basic nature of how light and dark works. You understand this. You don't need a physics degree to understand that if you go into a dark room, you're likely to run into stuff. You will find things only with the little toe on your foot. For example, this room, I'm so grateful for that we've got a number of night lights around here, because when these lights are off, there's no windows in this room, and it's dark in here. And so many times during the week over the years, I have walked through here and I have anointed my thighs with the edge of a pew. And I am so grateful for the light because it what? It shows me, it guides me in the way that I should go. It shows me where the boundaries are. And so these who have experienced gloom and darkness, hope is coming. Light is coming, but it's not just light that demonstrates that hope is coming, but it's also guidance that is coming. And you see in verse 6, he said that a child will be born, and this one that is coming is for you. He is for your good. He is for your benefit. A son will be given to us. The government will be on his shoulders. And then he says he will be named Wonderful Counselor. Wonderful Counselor. Now, we use the term counselor in a number of different ways. And so, for example, if you have an individual who is charged with a crime and they are taken to their first court proceeding, one of the things that the judge is want to know is who is counsel for the defendant. So what does that mean? Who's their attorney? What's an attorney's job? What's a counselor's job with respect to the law? It is to be advocating on that particular person's behalf, helping them to navigate the structures and the rules of law, how things are supposed to work in a courtroom. So they're helping them navigate that. But we use the term counselor in a number of other ways. We use it, for example, to describe those that are financial counselors or advisors. When you're dealing with someone like that, where you're going to say, hey, can you with all the ways in which money could be made or invested, I don't know what to do, so I'm appealing to you to say, guide me through mutual funds and bonds and hedge funds. I don't know what to do, so I'm appealing to you to guide me through this. There are family and individual counselors. What do these individuals do? Well, they help individuals who are experiencing broken relationships. You got a family counselor that's going to help a couple that is distressed in their marriage to navigate off the rocks and to get back into smooth waters again, to help an individual who is coping with the experiences of their past to get back into a place where they're not looking backwards but looking forwards. And so we're dealing with counselors to help guide us in particular ways. In school, you have school guidance counselors. Among the things that they do is to help a student as they are thinking, especially in high school, about how to prepare either for the workforce or how to prepare yourself so that you might be able to get into college, or how to best be prepared for college. I don't know what those rules are, so a guidance counselor can help you do all of that. Now, there are stacks of instances in life where we appeal to and where we benefit from, and we need counselors. But with respect to each of these instances, what type of counselor do you want? So if someone sues you, or if you are criminally charged with something, what type of attorney do you want? I mean, do you want the one that has never, ever won a case? That the closest they got to a courtroom was seeing Judge Wapner or Judge Judy? No, you want someone who not only knows what the law is, but who has been there, done that, and did it successfully. Now, with respect to a financial advisor, what kind of financial advisor do you want? Do you want the one that has their framed bankruptcy hanging on the wall? No, you want the financial advisor that drives a really nice car, right? If they're driving a 91 Camry, don't go to them, right? You want the one. You want the one that is. That's good at this. I remember when I had first gone before my back surgery a few years ago. I had seen my surgeon's, what would become my surgeon. I'd seen his face on the website. I mean, I was referred to him, and I pulled into the parking deck, and I remember seeing this person pull up in a brand new Porsche and get out with surgical garb on. I thought, man, that looks familiar. It turns out it was my doctor. I was okay seeing that he drove a Porsche, right? Because that says he's probably pretty good at this, right? If he comes up in the Pinto, second opinion. If you're going to a counselor to help you with your marriage, you say, listen, our marriage is on the rocks. We cannot get along. Do you want to go to the one that's been married 4 times, that just loves weddings? No, you want to go to one who doesn't simply understand how this should work, but has demonstrated through experience. Not only do they know how it works, but they have done it how it works. With Jesus coming into the world, we have one who has not only come as one who knows how things work, but has demonstrated that they have done so successfully. A term that has become cliche is this one, that you and I, we don't know what we don't know. And there's so much truth in that. It's a very simple statement. You don't know what you don't know. I remember when I had first begun pastoring, I was 26 years old. I was single. I'd been in school a long time, but I mean, that's where I was. I was 26 and single. And I was approached by a couple. They wanted me to officiate at their wedding. And so I was correct, I think, and I've always required couples to go through a series of premarital counseling sessions. And even then, as the one that was leading these sessions, I thought, really? I need you to come see me for premarital counseling. They're like, what am I going to say to you? Now, I could say to them and share, and I did. I shared with them some biblical principles. And I shared with, and I'd been through counseling classes, and I had read all kinds of stuff. I knew a lot of facts, but I was ignorant from my own personal experience about how to actually do this. I mean, all I could say, that these are the facts that I know because I haven't actually experienced it. The big deal about Christmas, the big deal about Jesus coming into the world, is that we have God, the Son, coming into the world, taking on flesh, flesh like I've got, flesh like you've got, who knows what it's like fully to experience human relationships. Why? Because he had them. He knows fully what it's like to have working relationships. Why? Because he had them. He knows exactly what it's like to experience the effects of hormones because he had them. He knows what it's like to feel emotions and the whole range of them. Why? Because he had them. He knows what it's like to feel physical pain because he endured it. He knows what it's like to experience all these things, and that he not just experienced them, he didn't just go through them, not just according to the things that he knew, but he went through these things according to the things that he knew and did it flawlessly. So then he comes to me, he comes to you as a screw-up. That he's not interested in canceling, that he's interested in having a relationship with. Not saying I'm done with you, but I want to make it possible for you to have a relationship with me. And not only guide you, and not just be your counselor, but to be your wonderful, wonderful counselor. You bow your heads with me?